Periodization, what is it and why is it important? Periodization for me is a systemized approach to achieving results with an athlete. It's a plan, an overall plan that can be broken down into different phases. In the science or in the research, you'll see words such as macrocycle, mesocycle, and microcycle. The macrocycle is the largest part. In the UK, we have a store called Macros, which sells bulk things. Macro being a word for bulk or for large. Or if you look at the word massive, it's the same kind of thought process to that word. Think of the overall plan. This is, for me, it's different training blocks strung together, say over a longer term, like a year. So it's the yearly plan. Then we've got mesocycle, meso meaning middle. For me, we're going to talk about just the current training block that I'm using for that athlete. Then we've got microcycle, which is going to be micro, which is obviously smaller, and looking at what they're doing week to week, day to day, or session to session. Let's take a look at the periodization models that I use with my athletes. And there's four main ones. We've got hypertrophy microcycles, supramaximal microcycles, Norwegian mesocycle, or conjugate, also mesocycle. So we've got the two microcycles, the two mesocycles, and if we put them together in a sequence, it would make a longer term, which would be a macrocycle. So hypertrophy microcycles are what I use normally at the beginning of someone's program. So they would have peaked, they've competed, and then I want to get them into a lower intensity protocol just to deload their body, deload their spine, deload their nervous system, and give their body a different stimulus. So they wouldn't normally, or for my strongmen, they wouldn't normally be lifting heavy that week. One of the protocols I love for this that's detailed on the website is the Anaconda protocol, specifically designed to help reduce lower back injuries, but help performance of strongmen in the long term. This would be 2 weeks at the start of their training block, or their mesocycle, if you want to use that term. Then after that, we've got a Norwegian cycle, which again is it's a lower intensity cycle that builds a base that allows someone to peak. The way I explain the Norwegian is its volume, its multi-frequency. There's going to be fatigue management involved, and it's the 60 to 85% of your 1RM range that helps you then create a base to create a peak in a later cycle. So the first 2 weeks could be your Anaconda, then we're straight into the 8-week Norwegian. So that's a total of 10 weeks in the cycle. The 8-week Norwegian is 2 4-week cycles where we build up, have a max effort, drop back down, build back up again, have another max effort. Then if we're looking at a macrocycle, we could move on to another 2-week microcycle using the supramaximal training. Supramaximal for me is purposeful overtraining or overreaching. I'm smashing my athlete into the ground on purpose. The bigger the dip, the bigger the super compensation. There's lots of different variables involved in this and reasons why. Again, I go into huge depth on my certification on the protocols I use, but again, this is overtraining and pushing their organism past what they can normally stand, which is in science referred to as hormesis. It's actually a 3-week protocol because you need 5 days off and then they would have a testing week. So now we're at 2 plus 8, so 10, 13 weeks total. Then say I've got an ultimate peak that I want to take advantage of with an athlete, I may use the conjugate protocol. I found this great for peaking athletes. Let's say we're doing a 6-week protocol. On the end of that, that's a 19-week macro cycle or periodization model. In the conjugate model, we've got 2 speed days with assistance and 2 heavy days with assistance. Anything else put into that week is going to be GPP or assistance if they're doing extra sessions, for instance, PM work. But that's the overview of the training blocks and a cycle or a macro cycle and how I might sequence them to elicit strength gains to the ultimate level. So why is periodization important? Why should we use it at all? For me, it helps peak an athlete for a set date. You can work your way back, and that's the way I write programs. We start with the end in mind. So we start with the competition, and then we look at what they need to do in their peak week, and then maybe the week before, so on and so forth. So it helps me map out, and that's the analogy I would use with an athlete. We've got the destination, which is the competition, but we need to understand the route we're going to be taking in order to get there to allow them to peak. Periodization allows you to develop your systems and your art. The analogy I would use is it's like a toolbox. You've got many tools in it, but it's when you're going to pick out that tool and use it. It could be as little as exercise selection. For instance, I've got certain exercises I rarely use, if at all, but then others that I use quite a lot and quite often. That's my art. It's my reasoning for doing it. It's my predictor lifts. It's my theory behind I would take an athlete to go from A all the way to competition. So it helps you figure out what tools you use at which point, rather than just following systems blindly. Using a periodization model will allow you to review and figure out which systems worked well, but also which didn't. You want to be able to recreate success. If you've got fantastic results as an athlete, you can then go back, look at the program and figure out why. If you didn't, again, you can take ownership and be like, this didn't work, or this went wrong with the athlete here, this went wrong here, this athlete doesn't respond to this. So it gets you to figure out what systems work and you can review progress accordingly. For instance, within my app Winning Strength Blueprint, we create a report. Within that report, I can look at predictor lifts, I can look at their injury history, their sleep, I can look at absolutely anything, and then I can map it out and figure out exactly why the progress did or didn't happen and why. Another reason I would use a periodization model or a plan is to decrease injuries. The athletes that stay off the injury table the most are the ones that are going to make the most progress. Injuries stop you in your tracks. It means you have to do a system reset and then rebuild again. It just kills momentum. One of the tools I use within periodization for my athletes is the deload. Every one of my athletes has a deload prescription, and then we can also auto-regulate deloads depending on what's going on in their lifestyle. Another element that I use are predictor lifts. Mainly, the issues that you see for injury occurrences is at the micro level. So it's the remedial lifts, it's the assistance work, and which lifts are out of whack. Within my blueprint, I can see exactly that because I can compare the smaller lifts to the bigger lifts and see what percentages they're at. Periodizing will also allow you to help prevent plateaus. A plateau, in my opinion, is a fail in program design. Your chain is only as strong, or a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. So finding that weakest link, eradicating it, making it stronger, will then make the athlete better. If you use certain periodization models, you can track lifts, you can track the model and how it's working, and figure out exactly what weaknesses your athletes have, therefore preventing plateaus. Finally, planning or periodizing will allow you to individualize to the athlete. For instance, last year, Andrew Flynn and I sat down at the end of the year and we discussed the fact that his stones would need to come up. Stones are very often the final event at a comp, and it means that if you don't do well, you could be in a great place and end up obviously off the podium. So we hammered stones in the off season. A lot of my athletes are, oh, why am I doing events in the off season? Well, it all depends on what your weaknesses are. What you are as an individual. I've had certain athletes that were beginners that wanted to do hypertrophy training. It's like you've barely started the sport. You don't need hypertrophy training, you need to get better at the events. And this was the case with Andrew. So we hammered the Atlas stones until he was obviously doing really quick runs at them. And this paid off because at Brits, if he didn't attack that run the way he did, he would have finished off the podium. So planning will allow you to individualize it and then repeat. So for instance, take Andrew again. This year, we're doing much the same, but instead of stones, we're going to look at improving his strict press. So if we keep hammering all these events and bringing all of them up at the same time, it's very difficult. But if we individualize, if we narrow things down and focus on one, it can make that athlete that little bit better.